Welcome to the Let's Talk Paralegal podcast, where the legal industry gets real. I'm your host, Etta Rosa, legal consultant, speaker, and founder of Etta Rosa LLC and the Limitless Paralegal Academy. This isn't your stuffy legal studies school lecture. We're talking mindset, money, modern workflows, and how to build a career and a life you don't need a vacation from. Let's cut the fluff, raise the bar, and change the game one conversation at a time. If you like what you hear, feel free to share and send us your feedback. Now let's talk paralegal. Hey guys, welcome back to the Let's Talk Paralegal podcast bonus episodes. So happy you're here for this one because today we're having a conversation that is honestly way overdue in the legal world, and that's leadership. Think about it. AI is changing everything around us, the way we research, the way we draft, the way we communicate with clients, and in the middle of all that change, the question becomes, what does it actually mean to lead right now? What does it mean to show up as a strong, effective leader in a legal environment that looks completely different than it did 2, 3, 4, even 5 years ago? My guest today has built something from the ground up, has gone up against some of the biggest corporations in the world, and has a perspective on leadership that I think is going to hit a little different. Listen in for more. Welcome to the Let's Talk Paralegal podcast. I'm your host, Etta Rosa, and today I have Emanuel with us. We are going to talk about leadership and what that kind of looks like before, after, during these generational times with the legal industry, how technology and AI has impacted the leadership and the way we lead with intention or with no intention, depending on what you look at. So, Emmanuel, before we get into the topic of today, how about you kind of introduce yourself to the audience and kind of what got you to where you're at today?
Sure. Thank you very much for having me on the show, first and foremost. So my name is Emanuel Galimidi. I'm a personal injury attorney. Our firm only represents those who've been injured or their families. I've been practicing over 20 years in Florida. Um, I practiced originally as a defense lawyer for about 15, 16 years before making the switch to the plaintiff side.
Oh, wow. Okay. Get it. Nice. And through those years, though, I remember in our pre-recording call that you were talking about there was a lot of differences in the types of environments that you were introduced to, especially depending on where you were at professionally and kind of the different management styles, if you will, that you encountered during that journey. So let's talk a little bit about that and what that looked like through your lens, of course.
Sure, sure. When I first started my career, I was at a very small kind of boutique firm. Three, four lawyers, including myself. A couple of very much at the time much older guys than me, a couple of assistants, and then ultimately when I found my way to the firm that I was at for a very long time, that was a much different environment. We were about, I don't know, maybe 10 to 12 lawyers at the time, with a smattering of assistants here or there. And yes, clear defined leadership as in who was in charge. But the rest was kind of, uh, I don't want to say scattershot, but much different and much looser. And over time, obviously, it gelled and kind of became a little more um, hierarchical. But for a while, it was just a project.
Interesting. And I remember the story that you told me that intrigued me was you couldn't find many assistants. You went through a lot of them, and then all of a sudden they kind of started questioning, well, is it really the assistant or is it you and your leadership? And that kind of
Right.
intrigues me, right? Because as a paralegal, I was always on that other side of the coin. And then I became a supervisor and I kind of understood both sides of the story, gave me a bigger picture than what, the normal, I guess, layperson would kind of be introduced to throughout the career, right? So
Yeah.
let's talk about that specific story and kind of what the outcome was.
Sure. You know, I think the best way to describe it for folks that don't know what it's like to be paired up with a legal assistant or a paralegal, it's kind of like a forced marriage. Where right, right.
I
It's
love
kind of
that.
it's kind of like that. And yeah, there are times that maybe it works, but other times you got to make it work. But and to kind of not to be too cutesy about it, it does take two to tango, right? And so and that can be challenging, I would say, for very young associates, first year, second year, third year, fourth year, and some that are 10 years and still, very immature. Uh, and then trying for them, even if they're well intentioned, to trying to navigate that relationship with someone who's likely, oftentimes I should say, 10, 12, maybe 15 years your senior, with that many years in the industry. So and one is clearly the in charge, but there kind of shouldn't be, right? Okay. And the other one is definitely not in charge, but maybe at times he or she should be, right? So it's kind of a bizarre thing that no one really links up. But you say to a 25-year-old person, hey, you're now telling this other person who has maybe been here for 10 years or 5 years or wherever what to do when you don't necessarily know where the bathrooms are, right?
Mm.
So that I think is maybe kind of the first place to begin the conversation is how do these things come together and who makes that decision? I think is the kind of the foundational piece to it. And to kind of get into my experience when I began at my old firm, I was I think a third or fourth year lawyer. I had very little to no experience with legal assistance. Just kind of you know maybe I worked with my old boss's assistant. He kind of shared her with me for some smaller tasks, and that was kind of it. And then it just became a matter of I think what your upbringing is like, quite frankly. And if you have some base level of humility and respect for your elders, like something very, very basic like that, then you have a shot at getting it right. But I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole because that's maybe like a 4 hour
I mean, I'll
podcast.
go down with you, so that's the problem.
No, fair enough, fair enough. We'll bookmark that.
Yes.
But so for me, it was my first experience with legal assistance, and yeah, I mean, for the first 3 or 4 years, give or take, maybe 5 years, maybe six around there, five, like definitely half my time there, or just about. I went through and I kept track of, at the time I kept track. I don't know the number now, but somewhere between a dozen or so assistants, somewhere around. Yeah, I know your eyes are huge. So and there is a theory out there, albeit controversial, that it was, my lacking in leadership skills. It's been debunked. And I can prove it. So after, some time, I finally found one assistant who was referred to me by another lawyer at the firm, who is fantastic. And then she's still at the firm. And then we found another fantastic paralegal who actually wasn't a paralegal by trade. She had a different type of position. I think she worked for the federal government. But in interviewing her, I could tell she would be good for the role and could be trained up by the more experienced paralegal. So kind of teamed them up a bit. And so, she kind of learned from her some of the basics along with obviously the other lawyers helping her out. And she's still at the firm as well, and she's crushing it. So, and I say that kind of tongue in cheek that it was my fault, that it wasn't my fault, I should say. And, you know, yeah, of course, I take responsibility for some of that. I'm not perfect. But when I look back at the fact that when I found two people that were really good, um, I'm gone and they're still there. And so I think that that says something. And to give it a level of objectivity, there was a time I specifically recall when I think it was the first or second assistant I had in my old firm, and chatty Cathy, like really loved to just talk and kind of, and we all know the type, right? Great, nice people, yay, but they kind of, they snake through all the cubicles and the common areas, and they're going from one to the other. And so I would ask her to, hey, can you help me with X or Y or Z? Oh, sure, I'll get to it. And then it'd be like 40 minutes later, and it was crickets. And I was trying to, like any, at that time, a defense lawyer, you want to get your hours, right? You need to get your minimums and so on and so forth. So the pressure's on. And it got to the point where I began calculating how much time between the task was requested and then how much time I had to spend following up. And then I took those point ones, point twos, point threes, added them up, and then took them to my supervising attorney. And said, look, I'm losing, 7, 8 hours a month, 10 hours a month, just simply following up with her on
Mm,
tasks. Can you please help me? And no, I didn't get any help. There was no help. And no. And
yeah,
eventually I had to become senior enough to begin to have enough clout, and I even use that as the wrong term, but enough complaining to get her moved somewhere else. And that was the other issue that I saw. And I don't know how it is at other firms, but where a problem assistant will get moved to a different lawyer, hoping that it works out with that lawyer. And yeah, and I experienced a lot of that where it was okay. Well, if it doesn't
mm,
work with this one, maybe it'll work with the other one, and so on and so forth. And eventually, that she was gone, but this was like a year or two later. After so I say that because that's just my experience, but it's not different than a lot of other lawyers. And then you have the lawyers that are just terrible people as young lawyers and just suck.
yeah,
And they're the problem, like legitimately the problem, you know, not maybe part of the problem.
right.
And that to me is I don't know how that gets fixed. Um, I have an idea, but it begins at the law school level. But I don't know how much of a fix it is. But I think that's, back to kind of the beginning of the conversation, that forced marriage is the problem. And no one really gives any thought to it. It's like, let's say, paralegal X, the lawyer just left. Okay, great. We have this new lawyer. Great. That's going to be his assistant, her assistant, and that's it.
Right.
And that's a tough one.
Yeah, and I see that a lot, especially when we start consulting for law firms, we go in and we dig deep, and that's part of our analysis. Our analysis is what personalities are working with what personalities, right? And this is nothing that a disc or an enneagram, none of these, kudos to all those personality tests. I still take them just to kind of see what's happening, but they're not going to give you the results that you really need versus that sit down and understanding what the struggles are. Because when you are just simply answering questions of what you would normally be on a normal day, that doesn't give you the full picture as, okay, well, what's going on underlining? Are there personal issues that are happening? So I shared this story with you before, and that was my last W-2 employee, right? He was an amazing attorney, brilliant at his craft and his trade, and he was just a brain, right? He youngest of his class, the typical A-type, what you would think of as the like quote unquote perfect attorney, that was him. He was an amazing at what he did, and no one's gonna take that away from him. But he was a sucky manager. He just didn't know how to manage specifically women, right? Like he was the good old boy club with the associates, and all the associates happened to be gentlemen, and the male paralegals, were great. But once I don't know what it was with the dynamic between the female and him, that he just kind of clashed and it just didn't work for him. And so fast forward a few years later, after I left the firm, I run into one of the person that ultimately took my position, and they're like, if you see this person now, totally different 360. So I always tell people when that happens, I always tell people you're probably meeting someone at their intersect, right? Wherever maybe they're going through a change, maybe they're going through something. Later on, I found out that he was having his mother was having health issues. So that could have been something, it could be anything, right? I'm not a
Sure.
psychologist. I don't know any, I don't claim to know all of that. But there are underlying issues that sometimes we don't focus on, which is kind of what helps us become better consultants and kind of see that bird's eye view of the firm in general, right? We come in, we interview every single employee. And by every single employee, I do mean every single employee, from the front to the back to the middle to everything. We interview everyone, we talk to them, we have conversations, we ask what their favorite color is. Everybody's like, what? This is not what I expected. But it gives us a lot of insight, a lot of data that a normal, check the box kind of test will not give us, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people invest in these enneagrams and discs and team building, and yeah, okay, great. And we do team building, so nothing against team building. But if it's
Sure.
not geared to the bottlenecks that this firm is going through, the team building is not going to work, right? So a great one that we love to do and introduce, just to kind of go back to your example where you were talking about, okay, we're just going to mesh these people up and hope and pray it works. So we do that. We team up those teams and we and preempt it, and we talk to the ops teams, and we're like, okay, which teams are your highest producers? And they give us a list. And which teams are not doing so well but still produce, but you wish they would do better? And they give us that list, and then they give us a list of those, right? The ones that they keep pushing around and
Yeah.
hoping and praying that something will happen, right? And so we get these three kind of just I guess lists, and we divide them. But what we do is we divide them in a way where people don't really expect it. Like they are thinking that they're going to be meshed with their with their, direct manager, and we don't do that. We
Okay.
mesh them all together because a good team works collaboratively, right? It doesn't matter who you're with, it doesn't matter anything. It's all about the mindset and it's
Yeah.
about getting the job done, right? Not every football player gets along with their teammate. Doesn't mean that they can't win the championship.
Right.
So, personality is personality. It is what it is, but the job needs to get done. So, and that's kind of how I sell it to them. So we go in, we do the team building, we mesh everybody up, everybody's confused. Because what we do is we put it in a fishbowl and they kind of pick out, but we obviously did the, preamping. They
Yeah.
don't know that in the background. Well, probably now they do when they listen to the episode. But they go in, they pull in a name that obviously they were not expecting, right? And so you can see the shock in their face and the horror or the fear or whatever it is because
Right.
nobody likes the surprise. And
Yeah.
so we come in, we put them into these little huddles, and we give them a set of questions. Regular questions, nothing that you need to like overthink. Like, if you could go on a vacation tomorrow, what would it be? Where would you go? If money wasn't an issue, what would you do with the money? Like just typical
Yeah.
conversations, what we would consider maybe small talk, more in an intense, but people start getting to know the person versus the set of skills or the perception of that person,
Yeah.
because we all like to put a persona when we're in our working environment. We're not the same person we are at work versus when we are at home. Yes, there are a lot of intersections, what we call the
Sure.
core personality, right? I am a strong, very outspoken woman. That's not changing regardless of what room I'm in.
Right. Right.
However, I tone it down a little bit. I'm not going to be disrespectful in a professional environment, and I'm not going to be disrespectful at home either. But there are boundaries, right? So
Yeah.
everybody has their boundaries, everybody has their moral, everybody has their tick, right? Whatever triggers them. And so it's only a matter of time until their true colors show. And anyways, so I love the team building exercise because at the end of the day, they all come back to me and they're all like, "Thank you so much. I learned so
Yeah.
much." And I was like, "Yeah, well, the thing is that we forget that we're human. We're human. We're going through stuff. There's a lot of things happening at home that we unfortunately cannot separate when we bring it out, to work. And there's just some things that are tougher than others that unfortunately we're human. Like we can't
Yeah.
do that. We can't turn off like a computer. We can't reboot, restart, and upgrade in the way a computer can, right? It takes us a
Yeah.
little longer, right? It takes us a little longer, a little more wires, a little more therapy, a little more time,
Yeah.
whatever it is, but we
Sure.
need need it, right? And so when we start looking at it, humanizing the experience versus just a checklist, here you go, if you check all the boxes. Like, I loved your story where you said you saw the potential in this particular, person, and you're like, well, they don't check all the boxes, but I see the potential, and I see where if I can mesh them up with this person, it'll work. And it did.
Yeah.
So, like, sometimes our instincts are on it. I always say if you feel uncomfortable in an interview, that's most likely the outcome. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's not going to be a good fit. So, whatever your instincts are, your body and your mind, your experience, everything kind of comes together.
Yeah.
That's most likely what's going to happen, right? If you're just hiring to hire, that's the result you're going to get. You're going to
Yeah.
hire to hire. You're going to have what we call a seat warmer. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, that's not what we need, right? We need
Right.
somebody with a great set of skills. We need someone that's dedicated. We need someone that's motivated on their own, and someone that can just get the job done in a most effective and efficient way. And so that's what this podcast is about, right? It's about giving them an outlet to where they can listen to people like you, and they can hear the experiences that other people are going through, and they can humanize it, right? Because I want people to understand, and probably the biggest takeaway, and we'll get to that in a second, for this episode is that we're all going through it. You're an attorney, I'm a business owner, I was a paralegal. Like, we all have things, right? We all have. And then leaders in particular, since that's what we're focusing on the episode, we have even more things, because we have a whole team to think about, and we have
Yeah.
a whole set of skills and a whole set of personalities that we need to figure out, like a puzzle that has scattered pieces everywhere. It's not in a pretty
Yeah.
box like bought from the store. And
Yeah.
so we got to figure out all these pieces and try and put it together and create a masterpiece. So, needless to say, we just need to give ourselves some grace at the end of the day. But I really do love your experiences. Do you have any takeaways that maybe like you think about in retrospect and you're like, yes, that's it? Hey, legal pros, are you ready to stop playing small? The Limitless Paralegal Academy is officially open, offering powerhouse courses, real world tools, and expert led training to help you build the career and life you actually want. We're not stopping there. The Limitless Paralegal Tour is hitting the road. We're bringing the mindset shifts, career strategies, and community straight to your city with epic speakers, actionable sessions, and zero boring PowerPoints. This isn't your average CLE. This is your legal career reimagined. Join the Academy, meet us on tour, become the legal pro everyone remembers. Visit limitlessparalegalacademy.com to enroll and grab your ticket now. Be bold, be brilliant, but most importantly, be limitless.
Um, one that it kind of dovetails with one of the points you made a moment ago as to, hiring the seat warmer and how the interview feels is a strong indicator of how it probably will go once they're hired. And it's something that I learned towards the tail end of my time at my old firm, and I've implemented it on my end here as we start to grow. Is for a while there was a time when I had, maybe two or three like A+ lawyers that were just great, like fantastic, and they're all doing amazing, in either at the old firm or in different paths that they've um, gone into. And there was a time when I'm like, okay, I have these two or three, pardon my French, badasses. Like, they're great, they're long term, they're fantastic. I don't really need an A+ lawyer. Now I just need like a B. It'll be good. I don't need to like crush it. And there's a lot more B's out there, if you will, than A's, clearly, right? In any diagram you look at. And so for a while, I was hiring, lawyers that I envisioned in that light, and they were C's, pluses, or B's, or B-, in that range, and what I saw them as I got. But they eventually didn't last, because I wasn't a good fit maybe for them as a boss, in my style, or vice versa, whatever it was. And so they were kind of, they didn't last very long for pretty much those reasons. And I realized, you know what, I'm screwing this up. I'm just going to swing for home runs. That's it. Because if I hit it, then great. Then I've got a lawyer who's here for 10 years, who's going to become a partner, who's going to just crush it. or I'm going to strike out and they'll be gone in like 2 weeks because I totally misread it. And I'd rather hire someone and they, fire them or they quit on me within a month because I got it wrong in the interview for whatever reason, um, than hire someone that I was right about, but they're just kind of like petering along and never really, for whatever reason, my fault, their fault, and make sure it doesn't matter, never going to become more than just that.
Mm.
So that's one thing I learned was just to just take big swings on people. And and the better you are at it, the more like you're going to connect. But if you strike out, who cares? I'd rather them be gone quickly than just meander around for a year or two.
Oh,
So that's
yeah.
kind of, one point. And the other thing you mentioned about, how you match up folks in the when you're doing your assessments, let's say for lack of a better term, it did remind me of something that I would do at the old firm, which is scavenger hunts, organize them through like downtown Miami or through Brickell, Miami Beach, Wynwood, call up different places and arrange them as clues. And it was random as well, but I would purposely put people that didn't know each other together on teams as well. So it does help, and I agree with you. It does humanize one to the other, and it just creates a lot of cohesion after that project.
And simply getting out of the environment, right? Because sometimes we're so stuck on routine. Like I know a lot of people are just really into routine and they thrive on routine and there's nothing wrong with that. Trust me, it's great. It's a great trait to have. I'm one of them. I love it. But every once in a while, I do give myself grace and permission to kind of break the routine because what happens is we get too complacent. And if we get too complacent, we get unmotivated and there's no way that we're going to get our motivation back without us actually motivating ourselves. So a lot of a common misconception that we get all the time, and this is like our number one ask is, how do I motivate my team? I'm like, there's no such thing. You can't
Yeah.
motivate them. There's no way that you need to create the environment for them to want to get motivated. But
Yeah.
you yourself cannot go in there and cheerlead them on and have them get motivated. That's just not how the human mind works, especially when they're stuck in this rut, of just routine, routine. And then what happens is, and I know this is going to sound like an oxymoron to a lot of people, especially coming from a consultant that creates operations and processes and thrives on automation, sometimes you automize too much. So I
Yeah.
do believe the yogi in me always believes in the balance, in the yin and the yang. We always have to have one with the other, and too much of something is just an imbalance. So when you automate to the point where the human doesn't really have to do anything, for that, replace it with technology.
Yeah.
Don't have a human do it. So there is a fine balance to the point where, like, a lot of people get this wrong with the intake process. Everybody thinks that they can automate the intake process. Wrong. You can automate it, but you still need a human to oversee it, and I'll tell you why in a second. But before we get to that, I want to let you know that intake is very important. It is more important than a Google review. It is more important than the millions of dollars that you're pulling in for marketing. It is more important than that event that you're throwing or sponsoring or doing all the things. Because what's happening is it's the representation of your firm. It's how you're going to treat them from there on out. So if you are telling your client that all they need to do is click a whole bunch of buttons and this is the experience they're going to get for the rest of the entirety of their matter, they're going to be a little standoffish and they're not going to
Yeah.
like it. They're going to want human interaction at some point. So you need to introduce that human interaction at the front. So, however, their experiences in the beginning is how they're expecting it to be throughout the entire matter, right? So, understand that, yes, automation is great. Having an intake form where they can click and sign, beautiful, that's great. But having that conversation and sitting down and having that actual consultation versus having that form replace the consultation, big no no. Especially when it comes to family law, personal injury,
Yeah.
criminal law. These are one on one interactions that you need to have because no matter how common, quote unquote, you think and how aligned the facts can be and how you can predict the case and all the algorithms in the world, the human is the most unpredictable
Yes.
thing. So you need to see, are they going to be a good witness? If I put them on the stand, is it going to go right or is it going to go wrong? If we're going to go to deposition, I need to figure out who this firecracker is, right? So yeah. And I found this out obviously through experience, right? I was
Right.
a heavy litigator. I litigated millions of files, real estate, personal injury, family law, you name it, I've litigated it. I've even gone to the Supreme Court and, assisted on a brief. So I get it, trust me. But the thing is that the human is the most unexpected. You can automate all you want, but you really need to know your client. And having some I got a pushback on one of my clients on one of the questions that I wanted to put into the intake form because they didn't feel it was relevant. And I said, absolutely, it's relevant. And it was a simple question. It was anniversary. So if they click yes that they're married, when is their wedding anniversary?
Hmm.
And this, for my method to my madness, is that one, you find out if they're going through a divorce or if they're not, or if how the relationship is going by how they answer it. If they put no, like I don't want to answer it, or if they put, there, there's something going on there, and that's something that you need to know, especially if this is a long-term thing, like a personal injury matter. And it's a way that you can find information without going directly into it, right? A lot of people, especially Latinos, we love to say we're, mi esposo, mi esposa, my wife, my husband, and yet there is no marital certificate to be found. So that's another thing that you can find out whether or not they
Yeah.
really are legally married versus saying, what is your marital status? Because they're going to say that they are married. They're going to
Yeah.
say, yeah, that's my husband, that's my wife, and that's not how it works. If there's no marital certificate, you are not legally married. There is no way that, that's going to
Yeah.
happen. So one question can give you a lot of insight. And so as soon as I explained it to them that way, they were a little more open to the fact. But these are little things that you guys can take with you that you can start adding on to, aside from their birth date and all this stuff, send them a happy birthday. Like continue and cultivate that relationship with your client. You never know if they're going to be a referral source at the end. So understand that, the way you treat your clients from the beginning is how you should be treating them throughout the rest, and figure out how that experience is going to go. That's going to thrive your business, your referral service, programs, whatever it is that your little heart desires and are creating and exploring and scaling. So with that, I want you to get the last word in. So do you have any last tips or tricks for the audience?
Um, be patient with people, and understand you may be the problem, unless you can prove otherwise. Uh, but but here's the thing, you better be able to. And I guess that the last point I'll end with is approach whatever it is with humility. Because you may have a very good idea of what you're talking about, and that goes to the 30-year paralegal, the same as to the first-year lawyer. You both know what you're talking about in your own ways, but it does take both people to make the marriage work. How's that?
I love it. The forced marriage. I think that's what I'm going to name the episode.
There you go. Feel
It'll get
free.
plenty of views. They're going to be like, wait, what's going on? All right, guys. Until next time, until justice is served, I'll be here. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Before you go, the Limitless Paralegal Tour is coming to a city near you. We have 3 stops: Fort Lauderdale, Phoenix, and Chapel Hill. Speakers that have actually reached Limitless Paralegal status are going to teach you everything that they know. You get a journal, pen, food, networking, all for $149. And each event is capped out at 100 people, so seats go fast. Link is in the show notes. Grab your seat at limitlessparalegalacademy.com/tours. See you there.